Welcome, everyone, for another episode of Data Wars Podcast, a podcast where we bring the latest insights and trends from the world of data, cloud, and AI. I'm your host, Prash Chandramohan, and with me is Ash Srivastava, as always. Ash?
Hey, thanks for introducing us, Prash. Today, I wanted to welcome David. David has 25 plus years experience in data management analytics, and we'll be talking today about expertise across startups, high growth companies, and multinationals. And, we also talked to him about what his focus these days is. And I am very excited about this because we've been trying to talk to David for a while. So, David, let's get started and just tell us a bit about yourself. I didn't do a great job at describing the great experience you have. So let's start with sort of talking a bit about yourself. How do you get started in data? And just give us a quick sort of an introduction of your background.
Okay, sure. And Prash, thank you so much for having me. Really pleased to be here today. I've spent about 25 years working in data management and more recently in analytics and AI. Probably about half my career has been at small startups, like in the master data management and the customer 360 space. The other half spent at large companies, often the ones that end up acquiring some of those small companies. I worked at IBM, worked at Informatica for a little while as well, and have had the chance to work across all facets of data management. So from master data to quality to governance to privacy and data cataloging, as well as on data warehousing and data lakes to now analytics and AI applications. So really happy to be here and looking forward to having a good discussion with you guys.
Well, David, if anything I can add to that, it's been a tremendous experience working with you. I got a chance to, Ash, you probably know this, I got a chance to work with David twice now. We were at IBM. We didn't interact much there for some reason. IBM is a big company. But then in Informatica, we had a great time together working on a same division, same group for a long time. And everything you did, I've cherished over the years. I appreciate the knowledge you shared and the experience you brought into the teams, and now as a partner. So that's really good. Maybe we spend a little bit of time talking about. You and I were talking about data modernization. A lot of companies are in the mode of modernizing their technology and also mainly data, right? Obviously, this is the biggest driver for their business when it comes to driving, tangible outcomes that they want to drive from the data. So I'm curious, how do you see data and analytics working together to help sort of companies who are in the middle of these data modernization efforts? And what David has to say about that?
Yeah, I see like data and analytics, and of course, more recently, all the rage is AI, right? Needing to work together. And they could work together and they should, and they are in some cases. There's a number of organizations that have very integrated data and analytic and AI kind of programs. But there's a number that don't, right? It's can be very sporadic. And I've seen a lot of companies that just focus on one. So you could have companies that focus on modernizing data and making data more accessible and hoping that it gets used, but maybe it isn't totally aligned with their analytics and AI projects that are running in parallel at 100 miles an hour, and the data isn't quite in the form that they need and it doesn't go used. Or recently with AI, I've seen so many AI projects that believe a lot of fallacies, like AI can sort out data management problems or somehow magically overcome them, or I'll just use the data that I have. But everybody acknowledges the data they have isn't good enough. So why would you do that as your first impression with AI? So I'm not seeing all three of those things optimized kind of together often enough. And that's, I think, what's really important. And maybe for companies to kind of break it down and say, okay, I don't have to modernize all of my data management estate and analytics and AI. Let's take it a use case at a time, but use case by use case, let's make sure data and analytics and AI are like really tightly tied together so we get better outcomes.
Yeah. Look, one thing I'll quickly say here, it goes back to our history of working together and how well we have to work together before. I had a question here I noted about icebreaker that I needed to ask you first before getting into this question, and I didn't ask you that.
Okay.
It's funny. But anyway, icebreaker, talking about icebreaker. So Is there something that we should know about that we never knew about?
Something to know about me? No, literally nothing. The only thing I eat, sleep, and breathe is data. No kidding.
Love it.
You know what? Maybe not a lot of people would realize that I'm a really big soccer fan. So Manchester United's my favorite team. I had a chance to see them a number of times live, which is awesome. And
Yeah.
as a data guy and an analytics guy, it's been kind of cool to see the stats that are finally coming around with soccer. It's like
Yeah.
it's so much later than like baseball and the whole Moneyball thing, but like
Yeah.
recently there's a lot of great websites. So after I watch a game, I can sort of geek out on the data side and say, like, does the stats back up what I thought I saw? I would love to do a data and analytics project for a sports team. Never had the opportunity. I'd probably work for Man United for free if they're listening.
That's a
If
dream
they're
job, isn't it?
listening,
Yeah.
I'll come and hire you for sure, David. But that's really cool because my son's really into soccer, and he is walking me. He plays this game when it has all the stats in it, and he's quite well versed in it. So I was sitting down one day with him and talking about it, and I realized that it is very complicated. Just understanding everybody has a certain score. It's made of 8 or 10 metrics under that. So again, I think data is being exposed to all these kids from next generation, and in a good way. They're not aware of it, but they're getting used to kind of analyzing data to pick their players and make their best teams. And that I think is really cool. I think what's happening with soccer these days with data and soccer. I wanted to kind of get back to the things you mentioned before we got into the icebreaker question. What kind of data do you think is essential to operate with these coming innovations, especially AI?
Yeah, I would say I'd probably start with the data used to train AI, to build an AI application, or if you get something out of the box to train it. That is essential. I don't think organizations are doing enough training and feeding enough data sets that are truly sort of well integrated and have the context to properly train AI. Last week, I read a stat that blew my mind, which was that most customer experience leaders, 75% of them, said that they would be comfortable using AI agents out of the box without training them on their own data. A lot of them without even testing it. I'm like, you shouldn't be comfortable. That's crazy. Like, yeah, you need to train it on your own data. Your own customer experience is
Yeah.
proprietary in a lot of ways, like how you want to treat your customers. Like, it's not going to work out of the box. Like,
Yeah.
what software have
I
you
mean,
bought that works out of the box for your
yeah,
company?
and hallucination is such a known common
Oh,
issue, especially if you're going to use something out of the box. You definitely want to make sure you've trained data tested and whatnot. And especially agents would be something which will be have an impact on the end customer as they're released out. What do you think? When we talk about AI hallucinations being a governance issue, do you think it is a governance issue? And can you explain how governance and how quality data can help resolve the hallucination issue?
yeah, I do think it's a data management issue and a
Mhm.
testing issue. Maybe I'll go a step further. I think the word hallucination is really dangerous because it almost implies that it's a little unforeseen, that it's some type of side effect that is out of control. It isn't. You've either used the wrong data or insufficient data to train your AI, or you've done a poor job testing your AI, or
Mhm.
both. There's lots of examples that are out there. Like Air Canada had an AI snafu where their AI was saying to a customer, yes, you can get a bereavement fare and claim it up to 90 days later. But in truth, that wasn't their policy. It was you needed to actually have all of your paperwork in order before you took the flight. You couldn't claim it afterwards. Well, where did the AI system come up with that? It didn't make it up out of thin air. It must have been trained on some other airline's policy, or it was an old policy of Air Canada. I don't know, but it's a
Okay.
data governance issue. And in order to have good training data, you need to catalog the data and understand the data, as well as have proper sort of governance of how data can and can't be used. Whether or not that was an old policy or some other company's policy, a cataloging and governance type program would flag that. But you also need to do some new things as well, like figure out bias, for example. When you're using your own organizational data, there may be biases within it, like based on the customer base that you have, you might end up training your AI to focus on a certain type of customer and exclude others. There have been a lot of high profile incidents of like AI applications for
Yeah.
job applicant screening at companies like tech companies like we all
Right.
work, where it's pretty
Right.
male dominated, and they end up only focusing on male candidates because of the data that was fed to them. It's like, well, you got to profile the data for biases as well. So
Yeah.
to get back to your question, yeah, 100%. Hallucinations are usually data problems, or you can find at least the root of them in a data problem. And it comes back to you just need to be managing the data better for AI and not just racing ahead without properly managing your data.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very good point about hallucination, Dave. Maybe we orient ourselves a little bit, and this is an area I know is a super passionate area for you. You spend a lot of time. You built a company to go after the customer data and managing customer data in the context of AI and other things that are going on. So maybe talk a little bit about that, just from a critical nature of customer data, and in terms of all the personalization, the customer experience initiatives that companies are focused on, but they also need to focus on not just building the best database of customer information, but also making sure that information about customers is also very securely managed when it comes to privacy and regulatory challenges that we are seeing. How do you see that equation a little bit?
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, these are age-old problems that we've had
Yeah.
before AI, before data lakes, before MDM, right? They've
Yeah.
existed ever since companies have run on more than one application, which is when I bring the data together, who's allowed to see it and what are they allowed to do with it? And as soon as, and one of the other problems is as soon as you physically assemble data for one purpose, it
Mhm.
may not be fit for purpose for your next use case. So this is way beyond just building a customer 360, putting all your data in one spot and using entity resolution to match it all together and having the one answer, the one golden version of the truth. Um, it almost makes the problem worse because all the data's there, but then what data are you allowed to use? There's like ways that you have to slice and dice that. You may not even assemble parts of the customer record for certain use cases. Like
Yeah.
going back a ways, Prash, like when you and I worked together at IBM, some of our MDM customers would tackle a certain use case first. I remember working with a bank that did Basel II reporting, and they said
Mhm.
they hardwired the system to match at a certain confidence level that was appropriate for risk reporting, which is an
Yeah.
internal and then a compliance kind of process. And then they said, now our next step is to use it for customer experience, but they needed consent from the customer to use wealth management and banking data together. Otherwise, they had to manage it separately.
Mhm.
Uh-oh, they accidentally put it all together for the first use case physically. So they had to unwind all that to tackle their second use case. So um, your personalization is a huge issue, but also so is context, right? And putting it together in the right context. And it has a really big implication on data management that it needs to be a lot more flexible. There isn't just one answer for how data is going to be used. It needs to be assembled for different use cases and not physically sort of put together in a way that it can't be sort of undone and repackaged for another use case, because that's just going to cause a lot of rework and waste a lot of time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I think a bit of a follow-up there, I think, is for me, look, first of all, every company is different. Within the company, we have seen these different, tunings that need to happen depending on the
Yeah.
use case that you're supporting. If for marketing, for example, we in marketing tend to have a bit more liberal. We went to, although the privacy is a big concern, obviously, we can't reach out to certain customers if they don't want us to be reaching out to. But in terms of how we do matching, maybe a little bit of leniency there compared to something related to regulatory compliance reporting that needs to be very accurate when it comes to, so the over matching versus under matching takes a whole new level of definition when these kind of things need to be dealt with. So I think my follow-up question to you is, you obviously have worked with many leading organizations in the world, right? So whether prior company where you worked or now you're working with many companies as well. So what kind of strategies that leading companies, that you work with are adopting when it comes to sort of navigating these complexities? Anything that stands out for you? One or two instances of that.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. So, like focusing on how data is utilized and understanding utilization of data.
Hmm.
Whenever I mention that to companies, I think everybody intellectually kind of gets that. Like, yes, data should be utilized, but when you ask, well, do you map out utilization scenarios? Like, what is the ideal scenario for a, I don't know, a customer-facing AI agent? What data do they need, and what does good behavior look like? And then work backwards to the data. Data management goes the other way. It's always bottom up. What data do we have? How do we make it better? High quality, all the metadata. Now it's available. Please use it, as opposed to understanding how it's going to be used and making it available. Um, so a lot of this is based on metadata, right? If we bring it back down to data management level, organizations do not collect enough metadata on their data and how it's being used. And that's a big problem, the how it's being used. If every time I ask an organization, can you measure utilization, they usually say, do you mean like counting queries, like against my warehouse or my lake or my MDM system, or how many times a service has been called? I'm like, no, I mean, like, are they using it, and what was the outcome, and did it achieve
Yeah.
the business goal that you wanted? And all of that's metadata. And organizations need to collect a lot more. And I've seen, probably you guys have too many projects where metadata and collecting it is listed as optional. And they're driving a new application being put in, or a new data management tool. And yeah, optionally, if we could collect some metadata, that'd be great. I don't think it can be optional anymore, because that's what drives this sort of new data architecture that we need for AI.
That's a great point. So, David, for next generation of MDM, especially as we are seeing AI come in the picture, um, do you have any thoughts on how the next generation MDM should be built so it supports, AI-driven personalization and privacy requirements?
Yeah, definitely. I think MDM has a really big role to play in AI, and in the sense that as we build these AI applications, they need operational data, and I think there's a whole new operational data layer that's required to satisfy that, and MDM is a part of that. And MDM historically has always been about like a master record, a golden version of the truth,
Right.
which historically has meant one version of the truth. And that's always going to be a requirement, but it can't be the only requirement, like in the mandatory sort of view. So I'd say like a few things that a modern MDM system needs to be. Number one is be more flexible with the matching and the linking of data, and then the presentation of it, so that there are multiple views depending on who's asking. Um, I also think it needs to be more virtualized. Like there's so much, like MDM is so central, like in the way that old MDM systems have been built, is that all data needs to come to them, right? Data comes to processing. I think processing needs to also come to data, and data mesh type services, and a blending of what you store versus what you pull from other repositories. I think a modern MDM has to take that into account, as well as much tighter integration with like analytic repositories that need a customer 360 or a golden view, but need to use like MDMs, like entity resolution, to achieve that, but need to do it within the confines of like a cloud warehouse or a lake warehouse,
Yeah.
or a lake house, excuse me.
Man, you guys very quickly get into a topic that is of my interest, new age MDM. So maybe let's spend a little bit of time on that. David, you have been a product manager. You have built MDM systems. You have done it all. I'm curious where your thought process stands as of today, because obviously the traditional MDM systems, they were monolithic, they were complex, they took a lot of time to implement, and there was a reason for that, I guess, right? But the modern age MDMs are a lot more different in that sense, right? And there are companies which have gone through traditional to modern MDM, building a modern MDM platform and things like that. So tell me a little bit about your thought process currently, how you look at new age MDM, and what are some of the examples that you can share as to how MDM is becoming somewhat modern age through whether it's modular services it offers, or running certain services in a certain way, etc. Anything you can share there?
Yeah, I think you hit a part on a really important word there, Prash, like being
Mhm.
modular. So I think
Mm.
modern MDM systems need to be a lot more modular than they have been. And that means the ability to incorporate other sort of modules or capabilities. Like with traditional MDM systems,
Mm.
they were built in the early 2000s, and sort of matured along that path through the 2010s. In parallel, things like governance tools came around in like the mid 2000s, and catalog tools, and like only recently are those things kind of being integrated as a module, but they
Yeah.
always needed to be there. There hasn't been a single MDM project that hasn't been done without governance. It's just that it's been done in requirements like
Mm.
and Word docs before you build rules in an MDM system, but it's governance. um, so MDM needs to accept new modules that'll make it easier to implement the MDM system, be it integration or quality and cataloging, and profiling of data. But it also needs to be more modular itself, like its own business services need to be part of larger data mesh type business services, and the
Mm.
ability to pose those. Its own entity like resolution, as well as like data stewardship type rules, need to be modular and taken and planted into cloud warehouses and lake
Mm.
houses to match the data, within those systems as well, and join and link that data. And as we talked about, I think it also needs to be componentized in terms of how it stores the data, like presenting those different contextual views of a customer. There isn't just
Mm.
one view that we're looking for. And I think that modularity, and especially being a little bit more virtualized, allows MDM to be implemented more quickly, more
Mm.
flexibly, address multiple use cases, um, and I think address a lot of modern use cases that we're seeing that are being driven by AI.
Mm.
Uh, I think something you mentioned, David, which struck hard with me is bringing these modular services together. And we've seen lately, a lot of big service providers are reinventing their MDM solutions to have data quality, the integration pieces, the catalog, all sort of coming together. I don't think the solutions are completely there yet, but we are seeing an attempt towards this where they're realizing that governance is the foundation of things. And then you need to first start with profiling or data quality, like you mentioned, and then you need to kind of have a catalog with metadata. That's very important. So master data, which is considered like the crown jewel, um, without giving consideration data quality, metadata, and reference data. Now we're seeing that solution providers recognizing their products that we need a unified platform instead of having these separate tools which do function A and function B and so on. So based on because you work with so many different industries and clients, how close do you think we are to achieving that vision? Um, and some things you mentioned, like entity resolution, having data in the cloud and ability to match that. There's definitely a lot of gaps even that exist today with traditional solutions. What challenges do you see? If you were to make an MDM solution for the future, what feature sets you think are missing in today's solutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ash, I'll kind of break it apart and sort of answer the parts of that question. So,
Mm.
how close are we today to realizing that sort of unified data management vision? We're getting there, but not
Right.
we're not there. There's a lot to go. There are there are only a handful of vendors that have all those capabilities, frankly, right?
Right.
And the market, most data management vendors have one or two, maybe three, but not all of them. So there aren't many that can actually even go down a data platform type vision. Um, those that have them do have data platforms, and there's integration. It began with like more administrative type, like you have a single login and a way to bill and things like that, and then more technical type integration. Where I said not yet, I'd like to see way more functional integration across those
Mm.
data
Mm.
platforms,
Mhm.
so that, yeah, it's not just that technically my MDM system and my governance system run on the same platform, and technically they have APIs and they can talk to each other, but the vendors already built the ways that they should talk to one another, and it's
Yeah.
all part of the functionality seamlessly. There's a
Mhm.
lot more that could be done there.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'd really like to see, and this kind of applies to all vendors, not just the data management vendors that have like all of the capabilities, is to build their data management tool, whether or not it's a full platform or just one capability, in a much more modular way. Like, assume that you have to plug in with all these other things. Be way more open about the metadata that you share. Expose
Yeah.
your microservices. I know
Mhm.
microservices was like a buzzword a couple of years ago. They
Right.
weren't that micro. I'm talking about the things that are inside the black box of an application. They're still not exposed. So
Mhm.
if you want to make, and this is a big deal to companies because most of them have already
Yeah.
bought data management tools and they didn't buy them all from one vendor, and they're not just
Mhm.
waiting for that one vendor to magically make them work together.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
company is trying to make them work together. And it's
Sure.
really hard to do that because that deep level of integration, you only get that when a vendor exposes what's inside the black box. And
Yeah.
I think that that's what companies should be doing. And I guess that's the last part of the question you asked me, Ash. If I was to
Yeah.
build another product, like MDM product or anything else, it
Yeah.
would be a lot more open
Yeah.
at that level so that I could integrate it with other
Yeah.
services, data management tools, and I would hope that those tools would be just as open. So,
Yeah.
and I don't mean an API like for just sharing data or calling a function, because the heart of a data management platform is metadata. That's the
Mhm.
thing that nobody exposes at a granular level yet, not granular enough. And if you don't have that, how can you start to use, well, first of all, get a deeper understanding of utilization and context, but also train the MDM system to be automated, like use
Mhm.
AI on the data management system. You need the data metadata to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think having an open platform that exposes these things is critical. And so
Mhm.
is making, not just having cataloging, quality integration, all built into the same platform, but actually making them work together in an
Yeah.
outcome that customer is trying to drive is also critical, right? I think that's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing from you, Dave. Great point. So maybe we'll switch over to the next topic. Something I would love to hear from you. Partly because you have been in the space for a long time and you've seen things evolve and what comes true, what comes maybe not true anymore, trends and innovations, right? So I'm curious, although we're already in February, end of February this year, but 2025, just looking at trends that are going to shape this year, I'm curious to hear what excites you the most, what innovations, what trends that you think are shaping the future of data and AI.
Yeah, I could give you three things. One
Mhm.
is, the first one's a continuation of what we've been doing, but it's building, and that would be AI for data management. So
Mhm.
utilizing more AI capabilities to automate data management. I think organizations should have a really bold strategy, like I do. I think data management can be 100% automated by AI. Not in 2025, Prash, but
Yeah,
eventually. Um,
eventually.
but I think that organizations need to have a really bold sort of strategy like that, because it really
Mhm.
pulls you like really far forward when you're thinking like that. I don't
Mhm.
know if that'll actually ever truly be the case, but if you think that it is, you're going to take bold steps to get there. And
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about automating a function, the type of steps where you say, how does a governance program actually roll out? And how do people decide what policies are? And could I use AI to
Yeah.
learn that and then say what the
Yeah.
policies are, which goes backwards to business glossaries and technical metadata? And how do I scan for data in catalogs, as opposed to automating one step from, a technical metadata being mapped to a business glossary, let's say.
Mhm.
Useful, but not maybe automating the whole thing. I think we'll see bigger steps forward because there's more tech on the market. The vendors are really embracing this, and I think
Yeah.
we'll see companies doing good things. Second thing, I think there's so much talk about AI and AI applications that go across different, AI agents that go across different business applications, that the demand for like a new operational data layer is
Mhm.
going to emerge in 2025. Because if you take data from all these different sources and it's in your lake and you build this great customer facing AI agent, where's the data going to come from when you deploy it, right? How are you going to figure out who's who? And I think
Yeah.
a big part of that is MDM, but I think data mesh and like pulling data from other sources is another big part of that. And I think people start to think of that as like a new operational layer. And I guess the third thing, and what I'm really excited about, would be customer-centric AI, like agentic AI, multiple agents, multiple applications. Think about things like a customer concierge. I'm not just talking about like a chat bot that can answer a couple of questions for scheduling an appointment. I mean a concierge, like when you check into a really nice hotel, they do whatever you want, right? And they also proactively reach out to you. If you could build that with AI, that could fundamentally change industries where the economics don't support them having a human concierge, right? Like not just luxury industries, any industry. And I think that that is where AI is ultimately going to go. I think in 2025, all three of those things will take something more than a baby step, but they won't solve those things because those are big problems. But I'd like to see big giant steps taken in 2025.
I absolutely love that idea of taking big giant steps, because what I'm seeing in the market is, like, there are laggards, there are, folks who are taking a bold steps, and obviously who
Yeah.
wins in this race, right? The ones who experiment, who ones who go ahead and try out things and possibly fail. I mean, obviously that's part of the equation, but if you
Yeah.
don't move, you won't make enough progress. I think that's becoming increasingly clear everywhere I see. There are companies we work with, for example, who are taking some really, really bold steps. They're investing heavily when there is an opportunity they see of automation, of bringing extreme automation in some cases, to data management in this case.
Yeah.
Those who try will definitely see benefits out of it, right? Some efforts might fail,
Yeah.
but that's just part of the equation. So
It's
great
also
point.
reason,
Dave.
what you said, David, is if because I was reading this post, and I'm seeing this, this all over social media these days. If some AI leaders talking is, AI eats data for breakfast, and you touched on this sort of slightly, where if you don't visualize how we want data management to be used for AI, we'll never get there. So that whole idea that AI can overcome data challenges, while not true today, um, you know it needs to be envisioned that data quality could be auto-corrected. If you have silos of data sitting around an organization, you have smarts in the AI agent that it can tell you, oh, hey, by the way, that server has so and so data set line which has not been looked at, right? So I think it's definitely not true that uh, and more so after talking to you, that if you just feed AI the data, it was sorted out. Um, I want to talk about what you just touched on with customer centric AI, and I see that there is a lot of interest in AI agents and co-pilots, for customer facing processes right now. So specifically talking about customer data management, what changes do you think need to occur to make those AI projects successful? Because I know the whole body of data management is something where the vendors are involved, and that space will evolve because of their work with the customers. But when it comes to actual work which we do with these tools with our customers, customer data is one of the main sort of data we work with. So I'm curious to kind of learn from you about the changes customers need to make to their data so their AI projects can be successful.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One would be having more context is always good for
Mm,
AI. So
mm,
connecting data together so that you have bigger data sets, connected data sets, like a 3D customer view, not just a 360 customer view. And like what I mean by that is full history as well as the present data, as well as like insights, maybe persisted insights, data analytics on the customer that you feed into AI models for training. Um, Data is often just sort of assembled, linked, or matched, and then presented as is. But I don't think there's enough um, analytics kind of done on the data in preparation for
mm,
AI or even predictive analytics. Frankly, things
Mhm.
like a think of it like a pivot table over your customer 360 to summarize data. And give you those types of insights, like sorting your customers into like deciles for how frequently they interact with you,
mm,
or determining values again, and like maybe that could be into quartiles and predicted future values. By the way, you have a whole history of outcomes, so how good are you at the predictions that you've made in the past? You
mm,
could measure that too. I think my point is, if you pre-calculate things and store them on that like customer 3D view,
Mm.
And like those that are like data scientists, those that are building AI will use it. If they have to pre-calculate all that stuff at the beginning of their project, they won't do it because they don't have enough time, right? When someone says, get me something up and running, I want to see a prototype in 4 weeks, you're not going to assemble like a 3D customer view and analyze all this stuff and all these building blocks, but you'll use them if they're there. So I think that's one of the big things that needs to change, as well as maybe some of the stuff we've already been talking about, Ash, like the ability to put data in context appropriately. I think that's another way that you can see a customer in 3D as opposed to more of a flat 360 kind of a view in the context of whatever AI, that you're trying to develop.
Well, makes sense, David. So I'm just wondering, to what you said, so for AI agents to work effectively, especially with, our operational analytical systems, we need a tight integration, like you mentioned, right? We need more context. So once we have sort of that state where we have more context, how do we sort of then, have analytics and MDM platforms work together with AI agents to achieve the view of the enterprise, for more productivity and, be a better business?
Yeah, I think we definitely need a tighter integration, like between sort of the operational and analytical worlds, like you were kind of driving at with the question there, Ash. Like MDM is very much an operational type system, to take an example, and it assembles data from operational systems and it's used by other operational or app systems. But that same data needs to be used in analytics, and it is in a lot of organizations. But it's the processing that I think is more interesting. So if you could take entity resolution that's inside MDM that's trying to figure out if these two David Corrigans are the same record and should I collapse it into one, you can use that exact same functionality to start to analyze data sets like that are in lakes and warehouses to say, I have this call log interaction where the user didn't authenticate, but there's enough data in that unstructured blob of an interaction that I can extract it and figure out that was David Corrigan. So you can use entity resolution with a different weighting and matching, but it's the same tool, right? The same process to build that 360 and ultimately that sort of 3D view of a customer. And that's the big step forward, I think, for organizations. Like a lot of organizations have data sets. So they might call it a customer-centric data set, and MDM will be one of them, and their CRM data will be another. And then they'll say to a data scientist, here's your primary and your foreign keys for all those systems to sort it out, right? Well, if you have those keys, then you're just pulling data that you already knew. But the problem is you don't know who your customer is. You don't have all those keys. Even MDM does a good job, but it doesn't know all of that stuff either because it's not its job to like parse through like chat logs and figure out how that's supposed to be related to a customer. And what data scientists have are collections of customer data, but what they don't have is customer-centric data sets that are already pre-built around this customer 360 view. And if they had that, then they just get to the analyzing part and the AI building a lot more quickly.
That makes sense. Most of the foundational pieces together, it just makes it more easier for you. Yeah.
Dave, constantly we see this in our customer base as well. There's structured data, obviously, but there's a lot more data which is unstructured. I know when you went on to build a company, you also focus not on just structured data mastering, but also how you augment that structured data with transaction, interaction, other kind of data, which oftentimes is in not a very structured format. So I'm curious, what strategies do you recommend for companies that are trying to sort of walk this balance of, on one hand, they have great structured data, which is much more easier to manage. Although we could argue that's also tough. we have seen MDM can be a tough thing, even though it's oftentimes structured data. But also on the other side, they have a lot of unstructured data, which is almost never explored to a degree that we all want to. So I'm curious, what strategies do you recommend for companies that wanting to make best out of the both?
Yeah, I mean, number one would be like make sure that you're looking for technologies that can do both.
Mhm.
The challenge is that they often don't, right? And you have tools that are good at structured data, and then like other tools that are, good at unstructured data. It used to be like tools that would come in like content management type repositories. These days, there are like a number of startups that are focused on unstructured data for data lakes and warehouses and for like these AI use cases. Um, but the thing is, you can't leave them siloed. So if you need to have two tools, like if you need to buy an unstructured tool because it's better at like parsing through data and understanding, or sorry, unstructured data and extracting the context from it, so be it. But
Mm.
make sure that you designate one of those things as the master. Like it drives me crazy when I see these, case studies that come up and yeah, we bought this new like cataloging tool and governance tool just for our AI world, and it runs in our lake and it's unstructured data. And we're defining our business glossary and our classifications and our technical metadata from scratch. From scratch. So you're going to have two versions of the truth around a business glossary because you already have that for the structured data world. So if you need two catalogs and two governance tools, make sure one of them's the master and that you can leverage some of the work that you've already done. Like you don't need to
Yeah,
reinvent the wheel.
yeah. That's a great point, Dave. I think with that, maybe we will start looking at some closing here. Look, this has been extremely knowledgeable session for me,
Yeah.
Dave. Just every time I talk to you, I learn so much. So if I can summarize sort of what I was noting down here, three things stood out for me. One, data modernization is a significant driver for many organizations, right? It's sort of an essence of achieving the modernization lies in how you connect what you're trying to do with the business outcomes that you are after as a company, right? So a lot of times such large transformations always need to be linked to a driver within the company as to what you're trying to achieve. That's critical in making sure those modernization efforts are successful. Second, I heard you talk about customer data and how that needs to be managed in the context of everything else in mind. Like, what is the purpose of that data? What are we using it for? Are we using it for marketing purpose or regulatory compliance requirements or whatever those are? I think managing customer data in the context of those things is critical, right? And then that defines the privacy, the quality, and other characteristics that you need to maybe prioritize and not prioritize, right? Depending on the usage of that data. And finally, I heard you talk about what a modern MDM looks like, how it needs to be modular. I think you talked about that word specifically. Um, and MDM, from what I heard you, it should incorporate extensive automation. It needs to be open in terms of how it exposes data and metadata externally, making it easier to leverage that MDM and the data within for a variety of operational and analytical purposes. Otherwise, it becomes again the same old monolithic system that nobody can gain value from, right? So the modern MDM needs to be really that modular. So those are the key takeaways I took
Yeah.
from you. Does that make sense, Dave and Ash?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I think just to add to it, I think everything you said, Prash, need to be sprinkled with just the AI automation aspect of things, where it sort of is self-healing or self-correcting, and I think that's sort of that roadmap which David laid out for the future, where we'll get to a point with that vision where organizations will be there, but you got to start thinking about that today on how you will bake that into the three things you mentioned. So, David, for one final thought, if there's one thing businesses should prioritize in 2025 to succeed with AI and data modernization, what would it be?
Yeah, the $1 million question. um,
Not
you
gonna
know
be
what?
easy, Dave.
Yeah, it's easy. This is it. But no, I would say, you know what? It isn't easy. It isn't about like one technology, like buy this and you'll be fine. It isn't about, hey, focus on this use case because it's the best thing that for every company.
Yeah.
Um, it does come down to one thing though, and I think it's this: change your culture, and then everything else will fall into place. If you want to be data driven and have data and analytics and AI be like truly intertwined,
Yeah.
change your culture, change your organizational structure, because too often those are separate silos. I
Mm.
haven't met yet a chief data, AI, and analytics officer I've met chiefs of two of those three things, and I've met chiefs of those individual domains many, many times. Why not all three? And underneath them, don't have a VP of data and a VP of analytics and a VP of AI. I think the most innovative organizations are starting to organize by domain. Like you have a customer VP of customer DNA, data analytics, AI, and you start to become more domain focused. So that'd be my takeaway. If you want everything else, the technology, all the other stuff that we've talked about to fall in line, change your culture first.
That's
I
great.
absolutely love that. Culture plays. What is it called? I think you used a eating breakfast analogy before, Ash, but culture eats everything else for breakfast or something like that,
I
right?
think so, or
That's true.
strategy or
That's
something.
100% true.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. That's what it went into my head. That's amazing.
No, thank you, David, for your expertise, and I really like the last bit of advice you gave on culture. And Prash, to what you said, culture eats everybody else for breakfast. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and keep your eyes out for our next episode. And again, David, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing with us all your knowledge.
Thank you,
Yes.
guys. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And there you have it, folks. Another episode of Data Wars podcast. And Dave, thank you so much for doing this. We really loved having you here.
Thank you, David. Thanks, Prash.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.